Well, I don't really know how the programme came about, but what I do know is that I saw an episode of This Is Your Life in the first series on a friend's television. And I said at the time, look at all those people coming through the curtains like that. I mean, why do they do that? Why do they all look the same? Pretty peculiar, not very interesting or original, I thought. End of that bit of the story. A year later, I was working in a theatre in the West End, the Savile Theatre, and in those days, people had to ring the stage door if they wanted to speak to an artist, and I was up on the third floor, and the public phone rang on the third floor, and it was for me. So I was called out of my dressing room, and I went along, and it was, This Is Your Life. And they said, we want to do a story about your father. And I gave a squawk, and I thought, that's that ridiculous programme that I saw, and thought how silly all the people were. And the researcher said on the phone, and we want you to be in it. So, and I did make this loud noise, you see, in the corridor. So when I put down the phone, I was sworn to secrecy on the phone. People said, what was that? What was that on the phone? Was it a new boyfriend or what? And I said, oh, no, doesn't matter. Nothing really. And they thought that was pretty peculiar, but I certainly never let on that it was to do with this here story programme. And of course, Nora and I, we couldn't talk about it because, I mean, walls have ears, don't they? And blind people especially have much bigger ears than anybody else. Their hearing gets very fine-tuned. They were all mostly non-theatre people, so they didn't have the same kind of sense of excitement as theatre people would have done, you know, like before a performance. But I did, and of course Nora was out front and I was at the back. So there was no communication, which was good. Yes, I think I did do a very embarrassing jump out, like a sort of squirrel. Oh, you know, knowing me, go too far, excessive, but think I must carry this through. And I'm sure I did. And then I was ashamed of it afterwards. Yes, it was well done, because the interesting thing about him was the fact that he had been a very successful actor, and then he went into the RNVR, and then he was blinded. So, yes, all of that side was very fascinating and interesting. Yes, and that was the point about him, really. At that time, yes, and then everybody forgot it. No, he was euphoric. He was absolutely thrilled to pieces, really excited, and to see the medical team, you know, who'd done the 3 operations, and the man who'd been a gunner with him on the Prince of Wales in the Second World War. Oh yes, thrilled by it he was. Oh, it was very important indeed at the time. And there weren't all these different channels to see, of course. And people were fascinated by the format of it, because the second series seemed to be much more harmonious and better than the first, and better organised and everything. And I'm sure he must have had a huge amount of mail and post and admiration afterwards. I do recall we went to a pub in Olympia afterwards. I often pass the pub now and think of it. And we just adored Eamonn Andrews, and we begged him to come too. But you see, it was stale buns to him. He had to do a programme every week, so he wasn't all that particularly keen on having a celebration drink with us, but we were keen that he came. He did actually come for about 5 minutes. Well, he was just so consummately professional and skilled at it all, and ushering people around and telling them where to sit. And that's why you rehearsed, you see, so you knew where to sit on these sofas and things. Otherwise, you know, you'd have all been hugger-mugger, wouldn't you? Now, I'm going to sit there. No, you sit there. That would have happened, wouldn't it? So it didn't. He was magnificent and utterly charming and on top all the time. Absolutely. He was meant to have fired the gun on the Bismarck that annihilated the bridge of the Prince of Wales, where Esmond was a gunner. And many other people on the bridge were very badly wounded, and Esmond was under a pile of bodies, and only his face and, his head was injured. And this man heard of this through the news somehow in Germany and wrote to Esmond and somehow found him, the letter did. And he, of course, it was absolutely wonderful to meet him. And they kept in touch by letter a lot afterwards, thereafter. He was a wonderful man. Very cultured, very lovely. The last thing that my father actually saw was the HMS Hood going down, that terrible ship of which there were only about 5-6 survivors, and he saw it upending and going down like that into the water. And then next, they were attacked by the Bismarck. A really lusty Elizabethan type character. A second Elizabethan. He should have, thank God he wasn't born in that era, but he responded to all of that so marvellously. The dances, the music, everything. He was interested in many things. Really a fine masculine male.